Well, I've been doing this 40 years, and I think this guy about to join us on the radio, I've been friends with and have known and been interviewing for about the same amount of time, because one of the earliest artists I remember connecting with and listening to and going to see, of course, on that legendary first tour with Metallica when they both had debut records out or early records out. And he joins us right now. He is the bass player and lead singer of the trio Raven, a legendary band that came out of the new wave of British heavy metal. It's John Gallagher joining us right now. Hey, John, how are you, buddy?
Eddie, I'm doing great, man. Good to hear you.
You too. Where are you at in the world?
I'm in the wonderful Newcastle upon Tyne at the moment, the mother country.
Your homeland there.
Yeah,
you're not
I'm out here. Half the time I'm here, half the time in Florida. And when I'm neither, I'm on the road. So there you go.
Is there still any sort of music scene that you can pick up on in your home area of Newcastle there in the UK?
Yeah, it kind of completely died, like it does, and there's a grassroots thing going on. We toured here back in March, and it was pretty good. We did well, and I know we're coming back in February to go over it again. There's a strange trend here with the tribute bands. A lot of people are, putting on wigs and way too tight trousers, trying to be people they're not.
That's everywhere, though, John. I mean, even in the
playing,
yeah,
the backing tracks, most of them at least.
Well, thank God. I mean, that's an epidemic that I'm very outspoken about. And
no, you're very outspoken and leading the charge on that, and I'm 100% with that. I mean, my whole thing is with that is, this silence, and then a bunch of guys pick up instruments and create magic.
Yes.
You don't create magic by hitting a button and just letting something play that you've already done,
Couldn't agree more. As a fan, it's beyond offensive, and I would think as a musician like yourself for almost 50 years, I mean, when you put that much work into getting up there and doing it live, it's got to be beyond offensive to have a band on the stage before or after you that basically just mimed to a laptop and everyone's talking about how great they sounded. I could have sounded great. If we did it that way.
Literally it. I mean, we all thought this had died to death with Milli Vanilli, like whatever it was, 25, 30 years ago. But I guess it's come back from the dead to haunt us.
Milli Vanilli's been vindicated at this point. My gosh, they look like saints compared to some of these other bands. What they're doing.
Too true.
So John, one other thing on your area that you're from, before we talk about this record, of course, and what's going on with the band, back when you were first starting and coming out of Newcastle, that was pretty fertile ground for heavy music, right? There were a lot of acts that came out of there, right?
Well, there's always been a lot of music out of this area. I mean, geez, back in the day, you had Hank Marvin, who you might not have heard of, but he had a band called The Shadows with Cliff Richard. They were kind of like the Ventures in the States.
Right.
Guitar instrumental stuff, very twangy. And then there was The Animals with Eric Burden, Alan Price. Those guys, they were huge worldwide. Tough band from Newcastle. And then, of course, Brian Johnson with Geordie, and then AC/DC and Sting, Mark Knopfler. There's always been music. But in the late 60s and 70s, there was a lot of heavy bands, definitely,
Did you know Brian Johnson when he was coming up on that scene from that area? And did you see Geordie at all when you were younger?
I didn't know him, but I did see Geordie in, like 77 or 78, and they were phenomenal.
Yeah.
They were really cool, and it's good that I'm friends with some of those guys on Facebook now, which is awesome. But
sure.
Brian did come to see us when there was a thing we did for the BBC. We did 4 tracks, which is floating around on video from 82. And he turned up there, and he just looked like a typical working class guy from here with his cloth cap and his whippet dog. He says, "Hey, you got to come and jam with the lads, man. It'll be great." We're like, "Oh yeah, sure, that's gonna happen." But he's just he never changed, And back then, you wouldn't believe. I mean, he's always been good, but back then he would have given like Robert Plant in his prime a run for his money. He had an unbelievable voice.
Wow, that is amazing. So let's talk a little bit about Raven. So you've got a brand new album out that just sounds like classic Raven, All Hell's Breaking Loose, that has just come out. You've been out doing shows. For people that don't know the recent history with the band, John, you guys were kind of fairly dormant for a while. And then for people that don't know, your brother Mark had a horrendous accident working on a construction site years ago. So that took him out of the game for a while. But it really seems like now where we stand in 2023, more so than in a very long time, Raven is a lot more active in terms of touring and consistently making new music. Do I have that right? I mean, have you guys kind of put a little more into this?
Working on the site, he was actually chasing some deadbeat that owed him money, and
Are you serious?
Kind of hit the lottery in the wrong way. He nearly died, for God's sake. But after he, literally got back on his feet, which took about 3.5 years, we started thinking about doing a new record. And that turned out to be the Walk Through Fire album, which came out like 2009, 2010. And that was us kind of planting the flag and going, okay, this is where we start from. And, we upped the game with the next album, Extermination. And then, our longtime drummer, Joe Hasselvander, had a heart attack, had to quit. We tried a few guys out, and one of the guys that was filling in was Mike Heller, who was, had been playing with Fear Factory, and just a phenomenal talent, just an unbelievable player and a catalyst. One of these guys that say, "Come on, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this," full of ideas, full of, constantly, 100% all the time. And it's literally what we needed. And I mean, he joined in June of 2017. In that 6 months, we did over 150 gigs.
Wow.
Which is just like, and that was, that was the path we were taking. And then, we had, like everyone else, our legs cut out by the pandemic for like 18 months. And then we're back on the horse again. But, one thing we didn't waste that time. We had Metal City, the previous album, ready to go, put it out in September 2020, got a fantastic reaction, and we just were like, yeah, wait till you hear the next one, because we had a couple of songs already, and we wrote an awful lot more, and this album was just more close to home. It was all us, as it were, because Mike engineered the album, we recorded it at his studio. So it was basically totally in-house. We produced it, we recorded it, and we gave it to this wonderful guy, Lammy Lassert, over in Germany, who did the mix. And it's exactly what we wanted. 40 minutes, all killer, no filler, move in next door, kill your neighbors, that kind of album. We wanted Van Halen 1, Montrose, first album. You play it, it kills you, you want to play it again. That was our mission statement, and it does what it says on the tin, as they say in England.
Yeah, no, it really does. I mean, when I listened to it and heard it, I was just like, having known you guys forever, going back to All for One and Wiped Out and all of that, I'm like, if you ever loved Raven, there's nothing not to love about this. It captures that energy, it captures that vibe, it captures that, intensity that Raven has always had. And the video I got a kick out of as well. And for people that don't know, there's a video on YouTube now for the title track, All Hell's Breaking Loose. They got you in a straitjacket there, John. Is that a sign of things to come?
Definitely. Straitjacket, and I got a pitcher of water thrown in my face. I got all kinds of crazy stuff. We got like 3 videos out so far for this. We got Go for the Gold, got All Hell's Breaking Loose, and Surf the Tsunami. And again, reaction, just phenomenal. Because, when people like yourself say, oh, yeah, it sounds like the old stuff, it's the spirit, it's the energy. Technically, musically, musicianship-wise, yeah, we're further down the path, and we're pushing the envelope. So there's always going to be, one foot in our legacy, and the other foot is going to be stretching out further, That's how you're hearing things like blast beats on some songs. We're not afraid to try stuff if it works,
And for you, as the bass player, lead singer, frontman of the band, you've always been obviously with your brother super animated out front on the stage, and you also, to my recollection, were one of the first people, if not the first person I ever saw who fronted a band wearing a headset, without a standard mic on a stand. Where did that idea come to you from? And had you seen anybody do it before you did it?
Yeah, I had. The first person that did it, and I saw it, was Kate Bush. And I was blown away because she was able to do this. She did those like Madonna and what's her name? That's who right now. Oh, geez. Taylor Swift, those big dance production things. She was doing that in 1979. And, such a trailblazer. But she, obviously couldn't hold a mic and do that, so one of her techs made a headset mic, and I saw it in a video. I'm like, oh, that would be just incredible. No more getting the microphone stand kicked and getting hit in the teeth or getting electric shocks or any of that. And then I saw Sammy Hagar on probably 80, 81 on was it MTV back then?
Yeah, there was that concert from St. Louis where he was running around the stage. There was a car on the stage, and I remember most of the show he was wearing the headset. Yeah,
that was our first trip to the States. Was November in '82, and I kind of looked into it. Didn't have the money for it, but when we finally came over in '84, the technology had kind of diluted down to the somewhere where we could afford it. And I went into 48th Street in Manhattan and got the wireless system, got the microphone, and we drove ourselves crazy for the next 6 months trying to make it work because I would sweat so much I would short it out. So we had what was called John's colostomy bag at one point. It was all wrapped up in plastic bags and taped on the, onto my back and all that. But we got it happening. And it was just gives me so much freedom. I'm able to connect with the audience so much better. And I mean, technically, I can sing, and if the sound is bad in one spot, I can move to somewhere else.
Yeah,
the only thing is,
no doubt.
To keep my mouth shut if it's on when I'm off stage. That's all.
Right. Exactly. You get caught on a hot mic saying something, it goes out into the crowd. Right. We used to do that when I had my old TV show. We'd forget that we were wearing a little mic underneath our shirts, and we'd be backstage and saying something about whatever, and we're like, oh shit, and then somebody would look and point like, the mic, we're hot, we're wearing a wire. I mean, fortunately nobody ever said anything crazy, but it's just you forget, you're kind of wired up there. So I could see how that could absolutely be a point of concern. You got to remember.
Yeah, you turn into a great mime artist all of a sudden.
Exactly. I also want to ask you, I saw you guys play less than a year ago. There was the tribute show to John and MaSSa Z. Of course, you have history at Megaforce. That's how we know each other. We started way back then together. Obviously, Metallica started there. And Metallica did that show in South Florida last year where they had you open and recreated the Kill 'Em All for One tour, basically. And you guys opened. They brought me down to do some hosting. It was a tremendous honor. I mean, it's amazing that those guys, as big as they've become, never forgot their past, never forgot where they came from. And I thought it was so cool that they put you on that show. They put the Raven logo on all the merch. They really recreated that legendary tour from back in like 82 or 83, whenever it was. Can you talk about that experience a little bit, what it was like for you to open for them and reconnect with them again? Or had you been in close touch with them?
Obviously, we had, played with them back in 2014, which came from, audaciousness, really. Our agent in Brazil, we were booking a tour in South America, and the agent said, "Are you still in touch with Lars?" And I said, "Well, Lars did a cool thing for our DVD. Remember the one you did stuff for the DVD too?"
Right.
Back then. And I said, "I can get in touch." He said, "Why?" He says, "Well, they're playing this huge stadium, the Morumbi Stadium in Sao Paulo. Let's see if we can open for them." So basically, I got in touch and said, "Please ask Lars, can we open for them?" And Lars got back and said, "Yes, that would be great." And they treated us like gold. It was amazing. It was wonderful. And so that, that was all. That was back then, 2014. So last year, we're recording the album in Los Angeles. And the concept comes up, hey, next year is the anniversary of the Kill 'Em All for One tour. Those guys are just up the road, if they're home. Why don't we get in touch? So I got in touch, said, would James be interested in sitting down and having a round table discussion, me, Mark, and him, just talking about that tour? And, we got it on film and all the rest of it, but we went up there, had a great day, got to see Lars, got to see Robert. Kirk had already left. James came a little later. They're always in and out of there. And we did the interview thing, and at the end I just said, well, if any gigs come up and you need an opening act, we are available, And he just said, well, we've got something coming up in November that we haven't talked about yet. Let me, I'll be in touch. And you're thinking, yeah, well, maybe not. But good as his word, 2 weeks later, you guys want to do this. And it was really, really wonderful to be asked. It was a great concept and a great tribute, They did a phenomenal job with the way they had their old backline stuff and all the different memorabilia on the screens. But they treated us like gold. We were really well taken care of, and it was a great show for us. And a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people, because a lot of people I know were in the crowd, and people are going, this band's phenomenal. I've never heard of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's just
there
it.
You go,
Yeah, and that's just it. With Metallica's audience, it's so diverse. They're out touring now, and I've been taking a lot of calls about the shows they're doing, and people have been calling in and saying it's incredible because there's people there with their kids, there's people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, it's a wide range that they're pulling from.
These days at gigs, which is amazing,
Yeah, but for you guys, I mean, the old school people that were there, like myself and others, they of course know the history of Raven and Metallica. But for a lot of younger people, I'm sure that might have been their first exposure to your band at a gig like that all these years later.
Absolutely, and that's what we feed on. We love that. It's an opportunity to play to people that haven't got a clue, maybe, and put us in front of an audience like that, and we will do good every time. We love that. That's something we're working on more. It's so political these days, but doing some opening slots with some bands that aren't exactly the same as us is it's a great challenge. And before the pandemic, we were doing great in Europe with that. We'd opened for Udo on like a 50-day tour. Udo, the Accept singer. And then we did Saxon in 2018, which was wonderful. And we were all set to do it again in 2020, and boom. But, we're working on stuff. And we're coming back over to the States in October, November. And we're working on a really cool package, so that should be good.
One last thing I wanted to ask you about the connection with Metallica, and that goes back over 40 years at this point. Whenever I talk to Lars, and again, as you know, I lived that time with you guys, and I worked for the label and worked for Johnny and MaSSa, and I remember Johnny just trying everything to get Metallica played on the radio when they were this new band with their first record. And I always kind of laugh whenever I see Lars or talk to him, because for people that knew how uncommercial a band like that was viewed at that time, to see what they are now is just you just laugh because it's just something nobody at that time, I don't think, could have ever predicted, this massive mainstream crossover giant stadium band. You guys co-headlined at that time that you did that tour with them in the early 80s. I remember, John, there were a lot of people saying, hey, there were a lot of people that touted you guys as the band that of those two would go on to be that band that could be this massive stadium act. You guys were the ones that had a lot of buzz on you too. Why do you think that didn't happen for Raven? And are you shocked, like so many others that lived in that time, that it did happen for Metallica, given how heavy they were?
Well, it's a phenomenon. It really is. I mean, that was our first US headline tour, and we picked those guys as the openers from hearing the No Life to Leather tape. And I put that on. I was like, is this on the right speed? And I thought it was like Motorhead sounding like the Chipmunks, I was like, what the hell? Yeah, these guys are cool. Let's do that. So, that just to set the record straight there, that wasn't co-headlining. That was their first opening tour. And James and Lars, I mean, they've been very, very open. That they were like sponges. They just sat and watched and took it all in. And that's why there's such a drastic change between the first record and the second record. Looking back now, it's a different band. And that band is the band that became world domineering, as it were. The Kill 'Em All band, that would have never happened. Honestly, I don't think that would have ever happened because it was so, for the time, it was so extreme. It really was,
Right.
Right.
That's a good point.
It was in the same way that Motorhead would have never been a household name, But as soon as you started hearing Fade to Black, and it's like, oh, there's another dimension to these guys,
And for you guys, John, because again, in full disclosure, I used to work for, as many people know, Megaforce in the management company, and they handled Raven. And I remember being on the inside and in those offices and hearing, the effort that went into pushing the band and breaking the band. You guys had that point in your career where you jumped, like Metallica, like Anthrax, like Overkill, from an indie label in Megaforce to a major label, in your case, as part of the Atlantic deal. But that transition for you, when you talk about a band changing, when you look back on it, there was a lot made of you guys going to the major label and the sound changing a little bit, and maybe even more importantly, the look of the band changing a little bit, and the video at that time, I think it was for On and On. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you feel that that was a big part of why you guys didn't get to that next level at that time?
I think really the problem was it was multifaceted. It was us being naive. It was the record company, definitely. And I mean, there was a lot of pressure with the second album. I don't think Stay Hard was 1,000 miles away from All for One. It had, big, heavy songs, medium paced, most of them, a couple of fast ones. The Pack Is Back album was a lot more commercial. And our sound is basically a bunch of contradictions balanced out, like a three-legged stool. It's got to be, a bit of commercialism on this side, a bit of chaos on this side, some good songwriting melody here and a bit of noise over there, and it balances and it makes sense. That was just way too commercial. And they pushed Eddie Kramer, the producer, to, soften things up a little bit and make it all poppy. They had this concept that we were going to be something like Bon Jovi meets Kiss or whatever. And, we turned up to do photos. We're going to do photos. Okay, here's these costumes. It was like, okay. And, that was the last time they were ever worn once. It was like, oh, dear. I can laugh at it now. It's like looking at your old high school photos. But they basically put a red nose on us and set us up the garden path. And when they wouldn't give us money to do a video, we had to have a big sit down and just say, this is awful. What are we going to do here? And we just said, let's just do what we want. And if everyone loves it, great. And if everyone hates it, great. But at least we can look in the mirror and go, we made a good record as far as we're concerned. And that was when everything got flipped back. We did the Mad EP, and then we did Life's a Bitch. And Atlantic was still clueless and didn't know how to handle any of that, so we parted ways with them. We negotiated our way out of another 3 or 4 albums, thank God. And, and at that point, the music was hard thrash or glam. And it was like, we're neither. And then grunge came and killed the whole thing. Right. So we just concentrated on Europe, and when grunge hit Europe, we concentrated on Japan, and then the wheel turned a bit further, and Europe opened up again, and, we'd been around the block enough to know that music is cyclical, and good music never dies. It'll go underground for a while and come back,
Yeah, no doubt. Last thing, speaking of the old days, what you of course back then were totally known for one of the focal points of the Raven Live show was your drummer Rob Wacko Hunter, famously shooting fireworks off the top of his head, wearing a hockey helmet when he played, all the craziness that went on with him. Where is he these days, and are you still in touch with him?
Yeah, I'm in touch with Rob. Rob is he does live sound and records mainly Branford Marsalis, the jazz saxophone.
Wow. Is that a 180 from Raven and blowing off fireworks off your head to recording Branford Marsalis?
Some rock bands and that, and ended up, doing something for Branford, and they hit it off. And
wow,
on the road all over the world with him. I think
so. He's a sound engineer.
They're in the UK or Europe right now.
Wow, that is amazing.
Grammy doing this. He's, Rob is always, an incredibly talented guy. And the production end was just something he really loved, and he picked it up and has done great with it,
Do you remember in all the years of touring with Raven and being doing this band, which again roughly is probably about 50 years at this point, you guys were all you guys were all super crazy on stage. You still are, running into each other, and Wacko doing what he was doing back there with the drums. It was so over the top in terms of like the energy and the craziness on stage at times. Do you remember? Do you have one of the greatest mishaps that ever happened? Like, was there ever a truly Spinal Tap moment that happened on stage with all the antics that were going on?
Oh, geez, that was last week, right? It happens. We literally were on tour last week in Europe, so yeah, this craziness is always happening. We used to have those ramps, and they had like a 3 feet by 3 feet, what they call it, lucite, that see-through plastic.
Yeah, sure.
And they had lights underneath. And this stuff was like 2 inches thick. Well, Mark smashed through it. All the way through. And I've got photographs right now from back then of the bruises on his legs from when it went all the way through. I have a whole collection of cuts and bruises in a photo album, which is, and Rob punched the cymbals famously when we were opening for Ted Nugent down in Houston, and the blood was squirting like Monty Python. We got 15 minutes in the set, and we had to take him off and take him to hospital. It was kind of ridiculous. He broke his arm at least twice on stage back then. I've went through stages, just disappeared into black holes in Brazil, walked off the stage.
Jesus.
And of course, we could fill a warehouse with the amount of equipment we've destroyed over the years. It's just where, it's not a case of like, destroy a guitar tonight. It's just we're really hard on the gear, and it fails occasionally.
Yeah, right. Well, listen, man, I'm glad you're still doing it. It's a true story of perseverance. You and your brother continuing this band, like you said, next year for 50 years since the start of Raven. And congratulations on the new album. Everybody, the new Raven album's out now. All Hell's Breaking Loose. As John mentioned, there's 3 music videos up there for you to check out on YouTube right now, and more tour dates and stuff in the U.S. to be announced soon for the end of the year. All the best to you, man. Enjoy your time there in your homeland, and I'm sure I'll see you somewhere on the road when you're back here in the U.S.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got 8 dates in Europe starting in 3 weeks, and then it's going to be the States. So check out Facebook and the website and all that good stuff, and we'll keep you posted.
John, take care, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, man, and have a great birthday. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, John. Take care. Say hi to Mark.
Will do, man. Cheers.
Bye-bye. There he is, everybody. John Gallagher of Raven. Great guy. Got a ton of history with them. I can tell you, when I was a kid working at Megaforce, working out of Johnny Z's house, there was such a concerted effort to break that band at that time. They, again, internally, with certain label people, certain people in the media, it was Raven, Metallica, Metallica, Raven, and there were a lot of people that bet on Raven to become the mega band, the band that would be huge because of the visuals, because of their antics on stage, because of this persona they had, because of the intensity of the music, because like John said, it wasn't straight up hard rock, but it also wasn't all out thrash. It kind of landed in the middle. And it's just, it's an incredible thing when you think about, you got these 2 bands on this parallel line, same record label, same management, doing music that at that time was thought of as pretty intense, Metallica even more intense, being thrash or speed, but Raven not far off. And they go out on tour together, playing clubs. And from that, one band goes off into the stratosphere and to this day is one of the biggest bands in the world. And the other is still playing clubs, 40 years later. I'm not saying that as a diss to Raven in any way. I'm just saying that's the reality. It just shows you in the music industry, like people who think they can predict everything. It's just not that easy. You just don't know how bands are going to evolve, how bands are going to change, the luck of the draw. In the case of Metallica, Raven, they both had the same management. Now, they had different guys pushing them, but it was the same company. So that's the other thing, too, is like sometimes when you say, why did one band go all the way and one didn't? A lot of times people will say, well, it's the management, it's the label. In this case, both of those bands had the same management label. But as you could hear from John, no bitterness about it and still happy to be making and playing music for a living and back out there playing around the world. And if you don't know the story, what happened with his brother, Mark, who is the guitar player in the band, Mark was working in construction because, again, those guys had day jobs. They have to. They didn't make a lot of money. They still don't. So Mark was now John said he was running after someone who owed him money, but whatever the case may be, Mark is working construction and he's on a construction site, running after someone, whatever he was doing. And he stepped on my understanding is he stepped on like a pole of some kind, like a steel rod that was on the construction site on the ground. And somehow when he stepped on it, it flipped up and went right through his thigh, like literally in one end, out the other. So as he's walking or running through this construction site, steps on something, looks down, and the next thing you know, there's a steel rod going right through his leg and out the other side. And it shattered his leg, it hit some arteries and almost killed him. And his recovery from that to just walk again, I believe, was like a couple years. And if you see him now, he still has a limp from it, understandably. So, that was a really scary thing that happened there. But these guys are warriors, man. They have persevered, and I got a lot of respect for that. As I said yesterday, I think the Raven story runs a parallel to the band Anvil. Both trios, Both have had a ton of Spinal Tap moments. Neither have had any sort of great mainstream success. But in both bands' trios, one Canadian, one of British, of course, but also bands that just didn't give up and still to this day aren't giving up. And that sort of perseverance, when you're talking about guys that are in their 60s and they're still running around in vans and playing in clubs, that is something that a lot of people will not do as they get older. So the fact that they're still chasing it, still doing their thing, whether you like the band or not, you got to respect that. That is in it for the long haul and in it for the love, because at that level, it sure as hell ain't about being in it for the money. All right. Thank you to John Gallagher. Again, his record is out now with his band Raven, the newest one. It's called All Hell's Breaking Loose.